If it's called Streets of Rage on the Mega Drive, does that make the Master System version Avenues of Aggravation? Pathways of Passive Aggressiveness? Actually, I would play Pathways of Passive Aggressiveness. I find the games that come out in the last few years of a console's lifespan really interesting. On one hand, developers have had years to get to grips with the console, and sometimes they can really make it sing. It's how you end up getting technical masterpieces like Red Zone or Toy Story on the Mega Drive. On the other hand, you get games that span over 2 different console generations. Or, if we're being honest, games that were really developed for the shiny new console, and somehow were shoehorned into the decrepit old one as well. Now, sometimes that's a great idea where the game gets developed with both consoles in mind, and it turns out relatively well. And sometimes it's Cyberpunk. Now, Streets of Rage on the Master System is a cross-generation game, but really, it's a Mega Drive game through and through. More than anything, the 2-year gap between the release of the Mega Drive version and the Master System version should indicate that the Master System was never a factor in the original game's design. Now, when I was growing up, my parents were, let's say, late adopters when it came to shiny new consoles. I was rocking a Master System well into the mid-90s. That meant that a lot of games were essentially out of reach, and Streets of Rage was one that I was desperate to play. Compared to the Master System's usual child-friendly fare, Streets of Rage seemed dark and gritty and grown up. Just look at the box art. You half expect Robocop to appear and just start gunning folk down. Actually, that does happen in a different game, but we'll get to that another day. Anyway, when I found out that there was a Master System version of Streets of Rage, I was thrilled. I never thought Streets of Rage would come to the Master System, so I wasted no time in getting it. When you squeeze a 16-bit game into an 8-bit console, the 8-bit version always lives in the shadow of the 16-bit version. And that's what I'm keeping in mind as I review Streets of Rage on the Master System. It would be dumb to ask if the Master System version of Streets of Rage is as good as a Mega Drive version. That'd be like trying to win Formula 1 with a 2009 Vauxhall Corsa. Instead, I'm looking to see if the general Streets of Rage experience made it across the divide intact. How does the Master System version feel when compared with the Mega Drive version? So, let's start with the most important thing, the gameplay. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's the music. Yuzo Koshiro's Streets of Rage soundtracks are rightly seen as legendary. Famously, the soundtrack didn't set out to emulate the bleeps and simple jingles of the arcade. Instead, it tried to recreate the sounds heard in the dance music of the time. And you know what? That man coaxed sounds out of the Mega Drive's Yamaha YM2612 sound chip that I didn't even think were possible. Just listen to this opening bass note alone. Tell me exactly where you think you would have found that in any other game before Streets of Rage. It would have happily sat alongside Entrance and The Real McCoy, spilling out my Walkman on some cheesy dance compilation. Or at least that's how it sounds on the Mega Drive. But how does it sound on the Master System? Okay, clearly the Master System's Texas Instruments SN76489 sound chip wasn't able to replicate the club-like sounds from the Mega Drive version. It feels like game music instead of music. But outside of the specific sounds used, the actual songs are recreated pretty faithfully in the Master System. Obviously there are cuts and changes to the songs because they're basically being played on a different instrument, but they are still recognisable and still catchy as hell. It might not feel like you're in the club, although I haven't had that feeling in well over a decade, but it does feel like the music from Streets of Rage, just like someone went and made chiptune versions of it. Anyway, moving along, and yes, that is a mild scrolling beat-em-up related pun, let's have a look at the graphics. Obviously, Streets of Rage on a Master System won't look as good as it does on the Mega Drive. If it did, then what would be the point of the Mega Drive? Instead, I'm looking to see if the 8-bit version of Streets of Rage resembles the Mega Drive version at all, and if it does, how close can it get? Well, on first impressions, Streets of Rage on the Master System looks fantastic. The backgrounds are detailed and yet keep the vibrancy and colour from the 16-bit version, which is best illustrated by the first stage. Look at all that cool neon signage. Tiny me would have wanted to live there. Except for all the gang-related violence. Speaking of gang-related violence, the character sprites are pleasantly big and detailed, with animation that's not far off the Mega Drive version. The bosses in particular are huge for a Master System game, and yet here they are in their full-ass glory. Except for that Master System exclusive rocket boss on stage 6. He's just a wee guy. Anyway, Streets of Rage on the Master System doesn't just look good, it runs brilliantly. It's fast, smooth, and responsive, unlike some other ports I could mention. Among its more audacious moments, the Master System even tries to replicate the scrolling background from the lift stage. And it looks like the Master System making an attempt, to be honest. But it's still pretty cool, and it's better than nothing. Honestly, I don't know how the Master System version of Streets of Rage could look any better than it does. Not only does it look really good for a Master System game, but it's instantly recognisable as Streets of Rage. But while a port can look and sound amazing, if the gameplay isn't there, then it's all for nothing. So the big question remains, has the gameplay from the Mega Drive version survived the journey over to the Master System? The answer is yes. And no. But mostly yes. Kind of. Well, that was a useless sentence, wasn't it? The good news is that the core of the gameplay is intact. When you're playing Streets of Rage on the Master System, it feels very much the same as when you're playing it on the Mega Drive. The way you move, the timing of bad guy attacks, the way your attacks stun bad guys, the amount of damage you deal out, it feels like the real deal. You even still get that cool special attack where the police turn up and firebomb a public place indiscriminately with no due process for anyone involved. Anyway, all three player characters have also made it across to the Master System version, with their individual attacks, strengths and weaknesses intact, despite only 2 of them appearing on the box. Quick side note, if you were going to go into the rain-soaked slums of a crime-infested city to do battle with its most deprived occupants, why the f*** would you wear all white? So, the core of the game is there, and it's great fun to play, but there are some significant cutbacks. For a start, there's no 2-player mode. Streets of Rage on the Master System is single-player only. But that's fine, because a 2-player mode on the Master System version of Streets of Rage wouldn't work. Why is that? Because of the other big cutback. Streets of Rage on the Master System only allows for 3 characters on screen at any time. More specifically, you can have the player character and 2 of the same bad guy. Truth be told, it's a major downgrade and it does affect the gameplay. Not only does it take away the swarms of enemies from the Mega Drive version, but now you only ever have to deal with one kind of attack pattern at a time. On the Mega Drive, you'd be dealing with a mix of slides, fly kicks, whips, axes, f*** knows what else. On the Master System, let's just say things are easier to manage. Strategies for crowd control go right out the window as well, because there are no crowds to control. Also, the special police attack is now really just for nuking bosses, because you will never need to clear a screen with it. With all that said, Streets of Rage on the Master System does employ a few tricks to work around the lack of bad guys on screen. First, it operates a one-out, one-in system, so the game throws a constant train of bad guys at you instead of just lining them up 2 by 2, like Noah's Ark, but with crime and violence. This does help to cover up the lack of bad guy numbers on screen, and it does help keep the game moving at a constant pace. The other thing that helps is that almost all of the bad guys' special attacks have made it over to the Master System, from slides to fly kicks to faking a hamstring injury. This helps to keep the gameplay varied, as you have to keep changing up your fighting style. It stops things from becoming too repetitive. All in all, the Master System version of Streets of Rage does have some serious cutbacks. But when I play it, it does feel like enough of the experience did make it across intact. It still feels like Streets of Rage, and it still plays like Streets of Rage. It's not perfect, not by a long shot, but it's close enough, and realistically, that's all that Master System owners could have hoped for. Streets of Rage on the Master System is, by all accounts, really good. In isolation, it's great. But when you put it next to the 16-bit version, the differences are glaringly obvious. The developers perfectly judged what to cut and what to keep to bring the experience over to the Master System and make it playable. But it's still a cut-down version of a game that was designed for vastly more powerful hardware. Which means that Streets of Rage on the Master System isn't the version that anybody chose to play. It's the version you got because you didn't have a Mega Drive. Seriously, those are the literal circumstances which led me to get this game as a child. Now, that doesn't mean it's not worth playing today. If you love cross-generation comparisons, then it's a must-buy. And if you're collecting for the Master System, then I would consider it a no-brainer. But like a lot of cross-generation games, Streets of Rage on the Master System is only the best way to play Streets of Rage if it was the only way you could play Streets of Rage. Today, having outdated hardware isn't the hard barrier that it used to be when it comes to gaming. With PCs especially, you can have near 10-year-old hardware and still get a playable experience from today's games if you're willing to make some compromises. But back in the late 80s and early 90s, the leaps in power between console generations were literally game-changing. Gaming was getting bigger and more relevant, with technology like CD-ROM and 3D graphics redefining what games could be. Sometimes those games were Quake, and sometimes those games were Night Trap, but it still was such an exciting time. Except, if you were on an outdated console or an ancient PC, that bright future didn't feel like it was on the horizon. It felt like it was closed off, like you weren't part of the conversation. So whenever I found a port of a game that I thought was reserved for more powerful hardware, let alone a port that was actually good and had due care and attention paid to it, I wasn't just excited, I was grateful. Is Streets of Rage on the Master System as good as Streets of Rage on a Mega Drive? No. But it was close enough at a time where that really counted for something. And that's why I love it. On a side note, did you know that Mark Miller, yes, that one, penned a Streets of Rage comic strip for the UK edition of Sonic the Comic? It is incredibly violent. Some guy literally drowned in a vat of molten steel, and not in a cool end of Terminator 2 kind of way. He dies in the bad way. The very, very bad way.